Realtime here, back playing some more Planet Zoo, and welcome back to Tiguidou Zoo, my Canadian zoo, episode 15. And this one is particularly exciting because it comes right on the back of the Europe DLC. The European DLC has just dropped. I was lucky enough to get early access from Frontier, so I very much appreciate that. Thank you very much to them. So that has meant I have been beavering, or should I say badgering, away behind the scenes for a little while. And I'm pretty proud of this one. It turned out pretty good. I think this DLC as a whole is really, really strong. Like, it seems like every time we get a DLC now, they're just slightly better. And I think the free update that we get as well, it just seems like those are getting considerably better as well. Just more and more really little nice quality of life things, little simple things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see, but just things that kind of really do make a difference and add a richness to your builds and your overall gaming. So yeah, this is a continuation. That we're actually kind of on a completely different part of the zoo. You can just about see it there on the left hand side. We are next to the Timberwolves. So Timberwolves was the first habitat that we added. I think that was about episode 4, I think that was. And obviously the last one we added the macaque monkeys, 2 parts of the macaque monkeys, and that is a completely different section of the zoo. So I thought I'd come over into this corner. The big thing about the European animals in general, particularly the badgers, is that they feel very much like a woodland animal. They feel like they kind of should sit in this kind of edge of a woodland. So I thought I'd do that, come over to this section. It's an area that I had previously basically just had kind of a dead end here. The back of that Timberwolves habitat just kind of leads to an end. Now I thought I've kind of got a bit of a picture of what's going to happen over here. I have got a rough picture overall of what Tiguidou's going to do, but it's still somewhat organic and develops as we go. So yeah, I'm trying to reuse a few of these bits that are around to keep this fairly consistent with what we've previously had in the Timberwolves habitat. So reusing these sleepers and things. You can see I've done a bit of terrain shifting. The main reason for that was that I wanted the whole habitat to be on a slope because it's fairly kind of long and thin rather than wide. So the guests are very much looking at it from one end of the habitat. So kind of key to getting a decent view for them was making sure that the habitat slopes away up to the stream up there. So that meant this path and all the terrain here had to kind of drop down. I did that right at the beginning. So putting in a barrier now, messing around with the paths a bit as usual, reusing these. This new stone texture, really, really cool. I think they use it kind of heavily as like a castle piece in some of the DLC promotion materials, but it works really well for just like a dry stone wall sort of thing, and this sort of idea where it's just just kind of fairly low key and simple, and actually the sort of thing that I think you would really see in the sort of zoo that Tiguidou is, because it's kind of low cost. Obviously that's all supposed to just be kind of rubble put together like a dry stone wall, but the one of the really cool things, and one of those things that I think we've talked about before, is that how much the DLCs have just become not only better but more and more open and more kind of dynamic, in the fact that so much of it now all is flexicolour and all is changeable, and that makes such a difference to the sort of multi-purpose function of the pieces that we get. So yeah, just doing a little bit of I wanted this to feel, the picture I kind of got in my head was, so I've seen, being someone who's from Europe and specifically from the UK, I've actually seen a lot of badgers in my life. My mum used to live right behind a badger set, in a house that had a badger set behind it, and they're amazing creatures. I used to go out there. You used to be able to go out there and sit. You had to be really, really patient. Go out and sit in the night by one of their holes. And just kind of watch, just sit there really quietly, stay there really, really quietly. They don't have very good eyesight, They've got a very good sense of smell, so you have to kind of make sure you position yourself in the right sort of place. But they are an incredibly like amazing looking animal. Very, very. I think someone said likened them to kind of a wombat, which is very much right, because they've got that sort of rooting nose, but sort of very strong kind of tanky like features, low to the ground and all that sort of thing. So yeah, back to the actual build here. We're just kind of fencing this off. One of the things I obviously want to make sure I was conscious of is that the Timberwolves habitat is right there, and the fence line for the Timberwolves is right there. And actually, quite funny enough, almost like it was, like I was RPing it, but the whole time I was playing around with the badgers in this, the wolves were all up at the fence, just on the other side of the fence. So I thought, well, we probably need to kind of take advantage of that and make sure that at no point a wolf can see a badger, and certainly at no point will they ever come in contact through the fence. So I had made sure I added a break between the two. So I put the set in. You can see they've done a bit of rock work, and as I said, the whole thing of this is supposed to feel like it's almost like a glade. That was the kind of the idea of it. It's like a little opening in the trees that's been cleared, and then the nature's kind of rushed in and stuff. But I wanted it to feel like it was almost like it's kind of an enclosed space. So that was the point of this bank work on the left here, and the little shed at the back, which is hiding the entrance and sort of implied keeper access. So yeah, I spent a lot of time just making this little glade area look as lush as I possibly could, and obviously I've done some of those tricks there with if you use the bark path, and then you sort of cover the edges up, you can get quite a nice looking effect there. So it's supposed to look like it's loose bark just sort of scattered around the habitat, and then most of the rest of the habitat itself is just scruffy and supposed to look like it's like a wild, and it's supposed to look like it's got a bit of a kind of meadow feel to it, and a lot of overgrown. Obviously I've gone to town with the temple rubble pieces as I do in the stream back there. This stream actually doesn't go anywhere on the right hand side of the habitat, so you kind of need to do something about that in the future. It goes obviously down and into the wolf habitat, but on the other side it just kind of goes up to the road, so I need to figure out what I'm going to do with that at some point in the future. So yeah, putting in some more details as ever. The badgers themselves, I think the animations, I was watching them, I spent a lot of time looking at them while I was building this habitat and building it in the kind of early access that we got. And one thing I really noticed is how well they've animated the kind of weight of the animal, how well they've animated the kind of almost like the thickness of the animal. And one thing that if you look really closely at them, remember we'll see this in the cinematics, but you can see how when their pads kind of depress and reshape as they put their weight on them. I think that's such a good detail. That's one of the things I think Frontier do better than anybody I've ever seen animating any kind of animal. It's just that ability to convey just those tiny little details. It's something that really sets them apart, I think. So yeah, putting in a bit of, started to rough up this sort of thing. Obviously we've got loads of weeds and things, as it is supposed to be. One of the slightly less kept areas of the zoo. The fact that the badgers are in there at all, I mean, I have to say I was really pleased to have the badgers. I guess there's some debate as to whether they are your kind of typical zoo animal. It's not something you particularly see in Europe, obviously, because they're quite a common animal. Certainly in the UK, it's not that usual, and you definitely wouldn't see them really very often in a zoo, but more in a kind of animal sanctuary kind of area. So moving into the second part of this habitat. So loosely, this is based on the idea that as I was doing this build, I'd started to play around and look at these little food vans, and I really love them, and I think they fit, and I think actually most of this DLC fits so well in kind of its understated kind of chilled vibe to Tiguidou, that I was so excited when I started to look at the pieces. I don't imagine we're going to use much of the the kind of architectural limestone and that sort of thing, but this sort of thing fits so perfectly. So I started to put this in, and then it sort of came across the so I didn't know this, but I hadn't really kind of computed it at this point in the build. But badgers' nests are basically called their set. And so I sort of came across this idea in my head. It was like, well, what else could I put with this little food van? So at this stage, I'm putting in what's supposed to be like a temporary toilet, like almost like a porta cabin toilet. And you see these quite often in, not so much in zoos, but certainly in kind of nature reserves and parks and things like that in the UK. Certainly kind of wildlife reserves and things. You'd see a little, it's quite common to see a little coffee van and then a little toilet block, this sort of thing. It's not, as I said, it's like a temporary looking toilet block. Then I started to think, okay, well, maybe we've got a little bit of an area going on now. And then I thought, what's another use of the word set? So I thought set as in set list, or set as in a music set that a band would play. And so I thought that would be a fun little play on what this area is for, and something that would add some theming and some purpose to the zoo. Because Tiguidou, I don't think, is particularly, it's certainly not a city zoo. It's got a feel of it's almost got the feel of a reserve or a sanctuary, a nature sanctuary. So obviously what went alongside that idea then was that there would be a bandstand, so somewhere the band would play. It's not like a big kind of festival, big concert sort of area, pretty chilled. That there'd be the occasional band and something. So this took me a while, and I don't think I got this. I don't think I did this as efficient as I possibly could. So there's a few weird things going on there. That canvas piece there that I've got, I'm using just to try and get a curve. So I'm just trying to get a subtle kind of. You see me doing it here. Trying to get a subtle kind of shape. The two pipe pieces there are just indicating the line of the segment that I'm making, and then I'm using those curving sections to create my shape and my kind of giving that curvature rather than just a straight edge. Now obviously doing that added an enormous amount more work to it, but I think the actual end result is pretty cool. This is actually up on the workshop, as is the toilet block. So yeah, I don't think I did this as efficient as I possibly could. Lots of different iterations of this, lots of different redos and refactoring, and then I still ended up with some pretty brutal just going through and fixing all the bits that I'd missed, or the bits that I'd put slightly out of alignment. It's obviously very similar to kind of if you're copying anything around. If you're doing anything that's like a circular thing, there's a specific technique. You need some central pillar to rotate, and there you see the magic of the rotation. But then suddenly I noticed all of the gaps, and I had fixed these a few times, and I ended up just going, you know what, I think it's just going to be easier just for me to manually go through and just fix them all up. So that's what I did. Obviously that time lapse looked, in the time lapse it always looks fairly painless. It wasn't too bad, but a little bit of a struggle. I wanted something on top, so just like a kind of decorative piece of focal piece at the top. Tried a few different things, a few of the sort of onion dome things, and actually then this piece actually worked really well. Gives it a bit more of a sort of grandeur to it. I think that's actually supposed to be sort of cast iron, but I think it worked all right in this. So then I've got and I've used my brick set there. So I've got the base, I've got the overall thing. I'm now putting in some railings. That's relatively simple. Again, using the new pieces, those little thin kind of bar pieces you see there. The metal pieces are really handy. and obviously the kind of classic looking bollards, using a bit of stained glass just for a bit of detail. Again, these things, you see them quite often actually. They're quite commonly seen in just sort of normal parks and things in the UK. But they're always quite sort of grand and ornate. So I wanted to kind of, give that detail to them. Bit of rock work. The actual path connection there isn't finished. I need to do some work on it, mainly because I'm not 100% sure if there's going to be a path coming down the hill from here, or whether we'll be just sort of continuing on a circular route. So yeah, then pushing that little idea on further that it's a band stand and there's it's the set. So it's supposed to be that this is actually kind of like a venue. I'm using a couple of fonts from the workshop. The first one you saw there was Ricey font, and then this is a Citronvert font. Where would we be without these font makers? So yeah, a little bit of detailing on the sign. Overall, I'd say I'm pretty happy with this habitat. I quite like coming across these little thoughts that kind of bring some reality to it, bring the idea together. It's always something that kind of helps me get there. Right, so let's check out the finished results. I thought I'd start us off up here by the Timberwolves, because it's been a while. It's been a while since we've checked this out. So we'll start off up here, as I said, work our way down. It's a bit of a hazy day today in Tiguidou. Excuse me, peeps. We've got all the guests in today. Don't usually do it with the guests in. Squeeze past all these numpties. I still like the view of the wolves. I think their habitat still stands up pretty well. So let's make our way down around this path. And as I said, this is all sort of slightly not finished from just about this bench onwards. I haven't quite decided yet what I'm doing with it. There's the first view you get of the marquee anyway, or the bandstand, which looks quite sort of grand. I think I'll probably try and keep that view open. I'm not sure if there's going to be a path heading down that way. So that is the point at which we can just about see in the distance. You can just about see the macaques running backwards and forwards down there. So that bridge comes up and over. So let's go this way. So yeah, this little central section needs to be finished off. Obviously the guests getting way too close to the wolf habitat there. So what we'll do is we'll go into the habitat first, and then we'll do a little walk around as we come back out again. So this is the keeper access. Didn't do too much of this actually. I would really love there to be an option to be able to just have a plain staff path. It would be so nice. So let's snake down this little bit. It's all nice and tight, and as I said, it's all about keeping that gap between, I guess, both the keepers and the wolves, and the badgers and the wolves. So we'll just actually push on through here, just so you can see that, as I said, that little gap there. And that was the logic behind putting that kind of tarp piece in there as well, so that obviously the wolves wouldn't actually see them either. So they'd obviously be able to smell them, but that's a fairly alright thing, I think. So, into the actual habitat itself. I think it's turned out alright in here. It's pretty dense, obviously, pretty much just up there. It's kind of up there. It's actually a little bit further back than it looks, but there's the boundary fence is up there. So there's a bit of a gap up there. Not quite sure if I'm going to do anything up in that space or not. Tiguidou is very much a tight, everything's kind of squeezed in. So yeah, this is supposed to be the implied idea that this was, as I said, it was like a glade, and this was cleared, and that this little embankment section and these kind of loose logs and stuff are left over from that. There's a fair old chunk actually of the woodlands in the habitat still, and the badgers tend to quite like hanging out back here, obviously away from the kind of guest area. So there's not really anything I've done back there, but so if we move on down, Move on down the slope. As I said, it's all supposed to just look a little bit. It's that that great thing of like the more dishevelled it is, the more dishevelled the look you want, the harder it is to achieve. They're so small as well. I love how small the babies are. I think that's one of the things as well. When we've got such a kind of small animal. So I've only got 2 of them in here. You can have more. I've got 2 and the babies. You can obviously have more than that. You can have up to 5. And obviously, if you wanted to, you could have multiple badger sets. So yeah, it just kind of snakes around a bit, goes off the back of this ridge. I wanted to kind of make it. I mean, the idea is that it's supposed to look like this is actually just that they're kind of in here, not that they're deep underground. Because they don't actually do that. I don't think they don't tend to pick places where they dig so directly deep. They would tend to just, badgers tend to have multiple entrances and exits as well, because they wouldn't want there to have potentially them be vulnerable because there's only one way out of their set. But we'll let Frontier off on that because they've done an amazing job on anything else. So let's just push on through into the guest areas. So I made these little, if you saw the last episode that I did with the macaques, I kind of got into this sort of line art. What is this called? I think it's like geodesic kind of drawings and stuff. Don't think that's right. Isometric? I don't know. You'll have to tell me in the chat what I mean. But yeah, I thought I'd sort of incorporate that into my zoo. I might do that. I might end up doing that with the rest of the animals because I actually really enjoyed it. Basically, find a picture on the internet, base it off of that, and put lots of bracket pieces down. These are actually up on the workshop as well, guys. If you want to grab those for yourself. And I'm really liking how kind of shady this whole area is supposed to be. You can get from there, as I said, that point of the fact that it's a kind of long and thin. It's supposed to be low budget. It's supposed to just be that it was kind of cleared out, not supposed to be somewhere that they've spent a lot of money on, because badgers are not they're not a big ticket item. They're an awesome creature, but they're definitely not a big ticket item for a zoo. So here's my little, I guess my little kind of venue area / coffee thing. Messy guests leaving their rubbish everywhere. There's a bin right there, you savages. So yeah, they go up inside that. I didn't actually do. I was tempted for a while to do the interior of this. I decided not to. That is also on the workshop if you want to get it. But yeah, these little food vans, I think, are just absolute godsend. I made this little trolley a while ago for my community zoo, which works quite well as a kind of little napkins and little cups and things. Just a little bit of extra clutter. And then the bandstand itself, I mean, it's reasonably high on the piece count, obviously, but quite sort of simple really in the end. In look, took a bit of fiddling. I did consider, and I might decide to do this, I did consider closing all that in, because you quite often see them with a sort of a ceiling, but it's not too messy under there. As you can see, I didn't quite get it perfect because it's the lines don't all kind of go perfectly, but I think it actually looks all right. So yeah, this may well end up being, this is not somewhere at the moment that guests can walk. We can obviously walk up here because we're in Tiguidou, but I think this might be an overlook. I'm considering this being an overlook into another habitat. We'll have to see where I go with that, or whether I stick with that idea. So put a little bit of tanking and stuff on the back there. So yeah, there's going to be a few little cinematics at the end, guys. I think I snuck some stuff back here as well. Oh yeah, just a little bin and some bikes and whatever. And then that's all going to go into the woodlands. At the moment, no plan for what that path is going to, but it's going somewhere. We have got a reasonable amount of space still before the boundary. If you've seen this one before, if you've been following this series, it's a small map. It's the Red River Barn Zoo scenario map, so it's quite a small space. which was deliberately chose that one so I could kind of pack everything in as much as I possibly could. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. Stick around for the cinematics. There's a few at the end of this. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and it's free for you to do. And I will catch you guys on the next one. Take it easy.